This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm very grateful for everything you do, so please don't stop. Look, we have some breaking news today that I talked about in a little short video I did earlier today, and that is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is now going to have to look at Duncan v. Becerra in an en banc panel, because at the last day, the 11th hour, if you will, the California Attorney General has decided that he does want to ask for an en banc review. So what I did is I asked Rick Travis to join me. Rick, thank you very much for joining me here. I appreciate it. Rick is going to tell us what this actually means and where do we go from here. So where are we, Rick, and what goes on from this point?
Well, this isn't something that we didn't see coming. We have been anticipating this and figured they would wait till the last minute, because that's usually what they do. So what this basically means is Attorney General Becerra this morning at 11:30 here on Friday the 28th went ahead and filed for an en banc. That doesn't mean he's going to get the en banc. And that's what we keep trying to tell people. People are automatically having opinions and, oh, we've lost, and being negative. No need for that at this point, and nor do I think there will be a need for it. So right now we're in what we're going to call a 21-day phase. And that is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has 21 days to decide if they will grant the en banc. And there is no guarantee that they will. So they have time to sit down and figure out if they want to go ahead, because what he's actually asking the court to do is to say that 3 members of the Ninth Circuit possibly made a mistake and they need to be reviewed. That is not an action that is lightly taken, and that is not an action that is often taken. There are people that ask for en bancs all the time, and the great number of them are refused. So there is a chance that 21 days from now, which would be 3 Fridays from now, I could be sitting right back here with you, Joel, and going, yep, no en banc. And at that point, then we go back down to the lower court and to Justice Benitez, and he could decide if he was going to lift the stay that would allow people to go out and buy the magazines or not, or if he was going to hold it. Now, having said that, there are other options that are still in play, and that's why I said the last time I talked on this, this is more of a long-term game. And part of what that long-term game and planning, and it's not a fun game, but it is the planning of it, is there could be a en banc panel called. There are 2 basic reasons it would be done. The first would be that they would feel that the orders of the lower court, and more specifically the 3-judge panel, were in complete opposition to the Ninth Circuit and what has been going on. And that wouldn't be the case. This was done exactly how the Ninth Circuit does the vast majority of their cases. So it's not in complete opposition. So it would fail there. The second area, and if you look at what Becerra put out today, his appeal is that large capacity magazines are responsible for mass shootings, and therefore everything they're doing, even if it kind of looks unconstitutional, is constitutional, because to protect the lives of you and me and everybody else in California. And he worded it that way because the second reason for an en banc is a special consideration for the public. And so by labeling this under the guise that this is all about safety for all, hence the name of the act for Prop 63, that is what he's pushing for. But that doesn't guarantee, because he's got to have the majority of judges convinced that large capacity magazines are what is responsible for that, and he may not get that. So there is a chance that this doesn't go to en banc. If it does go to en banc, then they will have 11 judges who will be seated. And again, I'm hearing people go, well, now it's over. No, it's not, because thanks to Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, there is more balance, more parity, so to speak, within the Ninth Circuit. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to end up with 8 liberal judges. We could end up with 6 conservative judges. So, and you also have to realize something. People in California have to understand that over the last few months, especially since Black Friday in March, what we have seen is more and more people out purchasing firearms. A lot of those people are professional people, including judges, Democrats. So we have to kind of get off this doom and gloom that this is a partisan policy, because it's not. We have a lot of Democrats that are showing up to trainings up and down the state. When I talk to trainers, they're showing up to gun stores. They're talking to us. We've had a huge infusion of moderates and Democrats that have come on board and said, I want to fight for my rights. I'm tired of being lied to. They've woke up. So this is really, really important to understand that there's not necessarily a slam dunk on this. But let's take the worst, darkest moment. So they come back and they go, yeah, we disagree with the other three judges. The moment that happens, we are filing to go straight to the Supreme Court. Why? Because of what I said before, the strict scrutiny in this case is the kind of Second Amendment case they've been looking for at the Supreme Court. And then that would most likely, as things stand right now, and if Donald J. Trump is reelected on November 3rd, would come down with a very conservative Supreme Court and not only become law of the land, but would open up a multitude of lawsuits nationwide that would retake the Second Amendment. So, you can go, oh, I want my magazines today.
Yeah,
be a small piece of the pie, or you can say, I want the whole freaking pie, which is what I'm pushing for.
Who pays for this stuff? I mean, this is not inexpensive to have these lawsuits. So in this specific case with this lawsuit, who's actually funding it?
So in Duncan v. Becerra, that's an excellent question. There's a lot of people that have fundraised off of it and how they do that. So I'll explain. There are the people who get involved initially, and I'm going to come back to them because they need a lot of credit. And then there's the people who fundraise off of it. So fundraising off of it is there's many groups that will file what's called an amicus, or what's known as a friend of the court briefing that says, yes, us too, we agree with whatever they're doing. And then they will put that out in newsletters and public speeches and stuff and raise money on that and then file other amicus briefs. Now, amicus briefs are important because it shows that there's more than one or two groups that are the named plaintiffs that are fighting for this. But at the same time, amicus briefs can take away, when it's used for fundraising purposes only, can take away from the money needed in the war chest. Because you got to realize, in this case, it's us representing the people of California, in this case, Duncan and several other named plaintiffs, along with the CRPA, that we are paying the bill against the state that in this battle has an unlimited amount of money because they can keep appealing its state-ran staff. They're not have to pay for it, or we're have to pay for everything along this fight. So who is the people paying for this? The National Rifle Association and its members, especially here in California, under a promise from Wayne LaPierre and at that time Chris Cox, who was in charge of NRA ILA, said, hey, any money donated in California will stay in California. And so they picked up a large share. A lot of that changed over the past couple of years because, as all of us know, the NRA has come under attack from two different groups, and that is the Attorney General in New York and the Attorney General in Washington, D.C. And whether you agree, disagree with all the things, I would remind everybody of three facts. Fact number one, the NRA has not had its day in court, so what we have are a multitude of accusations. Anybody that's been in business knows that former employees and staff often make up things, say things, blow things out of proportion, out of context. And so, and I've been questioned on this a lot. We don't know. Let's let the NRA, like any other entity or individual like you or I, have their day in court before we, the people, pass judgment. Because this is America, and you're innocent till proven guilty. Fact number two, the NRA picked up in like Rody v. Becerra, which is the ammunition bill, they picked up the lion's share starting this off. What happened was, as they've had to pull back and fight for their very existence, while at the same time fighting for all of our very existence by trying to run a campaign to help Donald J. Trump be reelected, the CRPA stepped in and said, we're picking up the tab and keeping going. And that's what we've been doing. So there are people who are like, oh, this is all CRPA. Right now it is. But I do not want anyone walking around saying, well, the NRA never put a dime on this case, because that's patently false. They have. And they are prepared where things stand right now, and we don't know where things are going to be, a year or two from now. But if this was to go to Supreme Court, they're prepared to ante up and put money into that fight too. But there's a lot of ground between now and then. So those are the facts of who pays for it. I hope that answers it, Joel. And I want to make another point too.
Sure.
We have a lot of lawsuits that are being prepped up. Believe it or not, I know this is probably not a shock to you, Joel, but the Assembly and Senate of California have violated their own constitution, their own laws, their own rules for passing legislation. So we are already preparing that if the governor so chooses to sign some of these bad pieces of legislation, we're going to still on that. Now, the facts are opening up those lawsuits is going to be the CRPA. But there may come a point down the path that once the NRA has been able to resolve its issues that it's fighting right now for, and the election is over, that they can jump in. And that is something that the NRA and CRPA have done with each other for decades. There's been times where we've been out in front and they've come in behind and vice versa. And sometimes that's just, us being strategic, because if the NRA puts their name up front, that can hurt a case, it can hurt a cause. And so a lot of times we've carried it in front because it doesn't hurt us as bad here in California as it does sometimes have the initials on it. So people realize the NRA is also fighting in 49 other states and the territories for your Second Amendment rights. And so Bloomberg and Soros aren't just fighting California, they're fighting nationwide.
Yeah, the difference is they're worth billions and we don't have billions. So it is important to support these groups if you're not already doing so. Rick, I wanted to ask you, going back to Duncan v. Becerra, let's say the worst does happen and we end up having to try to get the Supreme Court to listen to it. Does the fact that different circuit courts have decided differently, does that add to our chances of having the Supreme Court actually take up a case like that?
Yeah, that's normally one of the biggest things that any good set of lawyers is going to look for, is when there's a conflict between the different circuits. That is something that naturally will elevate a case up to the level where the Supreme Court will consider it, because there's a conflict between the circuit courts. So yes, that's very, very much the case. I think what's specific to Duncan that is so compelling for the Supreme Court is these 3 levels of scrutiny. People can go to our website at crpa.org, hit the Duncan v. Becerra frequently asked questions, or FAQs, and you can read all the legal jargon that goes on between the differences between strict and intermediate scrutiny and a basic level of scrutiny, and understand that up until you get to strict level, the government kind of has the upper hand, but it's strict scrutiny, it's the Constitution that has the upper hand.
Is it I'm sorry to interrupt you. I apologize. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Is it common for intermediate scrutiny to be used with constitutionally protected rights, or is that something that's unique to the Second Amendment?
No, it's pretty common. It gets used a lot of times. I mean, people try to make it just the Second Amendment, but it's been done on the First Amendment, other areas. It's a government ploy, especially when the government's trying to limit your constitutional rights, regardless of the jurisdiction that it's in. And I really wish more of our people read the Heller and McDonald decisions, because what at that time Justice Scalia wrote is incredible. It helped to bring our Second Amendment rights back into focus and clarity. But since then, what we've seen is a lot of legislation from the lower courts trying to water down Heller and McDonald. What happened recently with this 3-judge panel decision was, in a majority opinion by Justice Lee, he's bringing us back to Scalia's understanding of strict scrutiny and the importance of Heller and McDonald in making Second Amendment decisions. And so that is one of the things I think justices like Kavanaugh and others on the court are going to find extremely compelling about this case, is there's 2 issues that make it different from the New York case that everybody got upset about this last year. Number one, it's impossible for the state to boot out of the case where it's at right now. There's nothing they can do because Prop 63 was passed as a referendum. So the state can't just make another law and say, oh, just kidding, we didn't really mean anything about magazines or about ammunition. They can't do it. They're locked in. It would take another proposition to undo that one, and they're not going to run it. So that means it is going to be very, very pointed when it goes to court. They can't rule it as moot. And so therefore, this case has probably the strongest of any of the cases that if it goes to Supreme Court, this could be very, very bad for those that are against us, because not only would it apply to magazines, but it would reset the standard, which will allow for all these other cases in other states, as well as in California, like the gun roster, for us to be able to go after it, because we would have strict scrutiny. And so where the government's tried to play in the middle, they couldn't play.
How would a Biden Kamala Harris victory in November affect this case and others?
It would be devastating. I mean, I'm going to say something right now, not on behalf of the California Rifle Pistol Association, but just my own personal feelings. I mean, I tend to agree with a lot of the rhetoric out there. I don't know how long Biden would stay president before he stepped down and Kamala Harris became president. I think there is a lot of people in the party that would like to see that happen on the Democratic side. And the issue is she is one of the most anti-Second Amendment people. I mean, it is amazing how she will look at the American public and say, I'm pro this, I'm pro that. But I just like to point out this one point. She claims that she never smoked marijuana outside of college and she was listening to Snoop Dogg. The problem was she graduated a couple of years from college before Snoop Dogg came out with his first album. So either it was in college or it was while she was listening to Snoop Dogg. But more importantly, at that time period, she purchased a firearm, which means she filled out a little form. And you know what that little form is, don't you, Joel?
Yes, I do.
And on that 4473, which is a federal form, there is a question. Have you ever done something with something? And that would be
smoke marijuana.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And to get a firearm, you have to answer no.
Yeah.
And if you lie on that form, it is not a ticket, it's a felony.
Yeah.
She purchased a firearm and she's admitted to smoking marijuana at the same time, which means in order to have purchased it, she had to have lied on that form. So this is truly a politician that has went after hundreds and thousands of people on marijuana charges as a district attorney, as an attorney general, and incarcerated them for the very crime she herself committed. So if you don't think that she will not turn on you and destroy you, she will, because she already has done it. It's already a part of her history. And if she gets in, you can guarantee the Supreme Court will be set for decades against us. And when we lose the Second Amendment, you can kiss the right to address government, to speak in public. I mean, already look at what the left is doing on that. You would watch all of your First Amendment rights wither away within 4 years.
You mentioned that because of Donald Trump, the court at the Ninth Circuit, which used to be called the Nutty Ninth or the Kangaroo Court or whatever, has changed dramatically. Is there still change available in that court? In other words, whoever's president coming up, are they going to be able to appoint more judges to the Ninth Circuit?
Yes, and that's very critical because it's not just the Ninth Circuit. I mean, this was also called the Ninth Circus because it's the most overturned court in American history. But he has not only put more conservative judges and more constitutionally based judges on that court, he continues to do so, but that's not the Ninth Circuit. He's done that nationwide in all the circuits. And that's what's important because, you know, even if the Ninth Circuit was locked up, say, 55% on our side, you got to remember the same thing that we have yelled about in California. As California goes, so is the nation. Well, the Third Circuit, the Fifth Circuit, the Seventh Circuit became drastically locked up for the next 3 to 4 decades with liberal anti-Second Amendment justices. And those cases went to a liberal Supreme Court. It wouldn't matter what California and the Ninth Circuit said. We would be outnumbered on that side. And that's why I say all the time to people, number one, you can't move away from what you're trying to run from here in California on the Second Amendment. And number two, I don't care if you're in California or you're in Delaware or anywhere in between, you better be looking at what's going on nationwide and doing what you can to help out.
Well, I have some friends who moved to Nevada who are now wishing they hadn't. My father was a deputy sheriff in Oregon when it was a free state. And if he were alive today, he would be appalled because he loved the state. So things do change, and this stuff does follow you wherever you go. You got to fight the battle where you are because it's going to follow you if you don't. You mentioned the 21 days getting back to Duncan v. Becerra. So essentially, it sounds like what's happened essentially is the time clock has been started again.
Correct.
Do they typically do they do the same kind of thing where they take the entire 21 days to finally announce a decision, or do they announce it anywhere in the middle, or how does that work?
They can announce it anytime they want to.
So that's something we could find out tomorrow. We could find out 21 days from now. But
right.
And would you say, you said that, I didn't know this, you said that a lot of times people ask for an en banc decision and they don't get one.
No.
Does that also happen when you're the Attorney General, or does he get some special deference because
the Attorney General asks and he gets told no?
That's very interesting. I didn't know that. Sometimes I wonder if they don't give deference to the Attorney General or something.
No.
Very interesting. Okay, so if they don't give him, let's say you mentioned the worst case. Let's think about the best case.
Hey.
The 21 days goes, but yeah, I mean, look on the bright side, brother, right? We get to the end of the 21 days and the court says, no. What happens?
So a couple things happen. Number one, the ruling of the Ninth Circuit lower panel is now the ruling of the Ninth Circuit. The second thing is then it would go back down to Judge Benitez to lift the stay. Now, what happens after that could become really interesting in California politics. I mean, does the governor go to friends and stuff there inside the Assembly and Senate? But even in that case, you have to look, the electorate is, in this last almost 70 days, there is a lot of movement on the ground. There are a lot of campaigns that, despite what the press says, are basically under 5 points, give or take, of which way they're going to go. So the fight is heating up. We're on the ground in several key races. There's other groups on the ground in several key races. And so we could end up with not a majority, but enough votes that two things would happen. Number one, Democrats that are like in that next tier that barely made it this time will be a little bit more reticent to just vote party lines, because they'll be like, hey, a couple points more difference, that could be me that's no longer in office, because they just saw what happened to their neighbors. They used to send the chairs in the Capitol next to them because they've been replaced. So that is one of the things that we're looking at. And oftentimes, just a couple of years ago, we had a few more, Republicans and more conservative-leaning Democrats in. We just stopped a lot of bills just because there wasn't enough to get the bill across. There was a lot of people that said they didn't vote yes, but they just didn't vote. Well, if you don't have enough votes, it doesn't go through. And I'll take that win any day of the week. So one of the things we're telling is people are like, well, how do I get involved? I hate this Duncan thing because it's now, this en banc 21-day thing. And I tell them, how you get involved? Go walk some precincts, start talking to some people, and don't yell at them. Just have a conversation. So many people that I've been talking to lately, it's just a casual conversation. They start talking about they're upset with this because everybody's upset about stuff. And I'm like, yeah, and what do you think about this? And we get into the area, and one of the things I keep telling people since we got this decision down is, I heard a lady at the grocery store just a couple of days ago, I wanted to pick up some briquettes for the barbecue. And this lady was standing in front of me and she said, oh, so many people die every day to gun violence, because she got something from one of our opposers. And I said, compared to how many people's lives are saved today? And she goes, well, sweetie, 20 people a day in America for sure die from guns. And I said, and 657 minimally are saved by them. And that's not from law enforcement. That's from everyday people. And she was like, oh, where'd you get that, Fox News? I said, no, from the 9th District Court of Appeals. And there were like 6 people that were standing there by the checkout line. I mean, everybody's got their mask on. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you can go check it out. Told them where to go check it out. And they were like, I did not know that. And one of the guys goes, wow, those numbers really change how you view this. And I'm like, yeah. And I wasn't signing people up to be members or getting donations. I'm just trying to get people to realize that, if you look at the top 20 things that take lives, and if our Senate and our Assembly were really concerned about saving the lives of Californians, the very first place they should go is the hospitals, because tens of thousands of people die every year in California from medical malpractice. How many laws have been on the Assembly and Senate floor in the past decade on that? Yeah, donut. But for something that doesn't even make the top 20, we get 25, 30 different attempts every legislative season. So that's why I say this is about gun grabbing. It's not about saving lives, because if it was, there are literally 20 things that you're more likely to die from than someone using a gun improperly against you. And we're not doing anything in the legislature on the vast majority of those.
Yeah, there's actually a Latin term used as cause of death, and I've forgotten what it is, but it cracked me up when I read it, which means doctor-induced.
Right.
But they put it in Latin because then you think it was a disease. No, right. It's the doctor screwed up. You mentioned you've talked about elections here. I want to make sure I understood you, because I'm in the People's Socialist Republic of California.
Right.
Are you telling me that there are some assembly and state senate races that we could actually win?
Yes.
Really?
Really?
Do we know which ones those are?
Yeah, there's actually a massive thing that we're coming out with on Tuesday from CRPA that will have the list of where those are at and where we need help. We're contacting people, and we're working with those campaigns, and we're doing quite a bit to help out, because a lot of those races are with 3 to 4 points, but some are in Orange County, some are in North San Diego, some are up in the Central Valley. And so, yeah, there's some really critical races that we could flip.
That's pretty cool. So that wouldn't give us a majority, but would it take away the anti-gunner super majority?
Yes, it would.
That's huge.
Yeah, it really is.
That's huge.
And again, you talk about all the time, Joel, you get the whole negative stuff, after you post videos. I constantly get that when I'm out speaking. They're like, yeah, but you're not getting us the super majority. Okay, hold on. We have to move the pendulum. Can I please get a break for getting us out of the end zone and getting us closer to the 50-yard marker on the field where we have a fair fight? So, that's phase one, and that's what we're working on. We didn't lose these rights overnight. It was done incrementally. And it was done through two basic methodologies that people need to understand. The first one was they took the whole crowd and they picked on the fringes. And this is where I think the millennials are probably the most adept generation, if they're paying attention, to be able to push back, because they're constantly looking for those on the fringe being isolated and picked on. If you look at how government goes after your constitutional rights, they don't go after the big dog in the middle. They go after the little ones. And I'm using dogs as an example because in this state, when there was a big push about 10 years ago to start removing dogs from hunting and give them legal rights so they could sue their owners and all this, they didn't go after the American Kennel Club. They didn't go after the big hunting dog groups like Ducks Unlimited and stuff like that. They went after the smallest dog group, the California Houndsmen. They're literally the smallest group, and they went after with everything. And when they thought they got the crushing blow there, then they started to go after just the dogs that hunt quail and pheasants. And now just the dogs, it's just been incremental. And it took us about 4 years to get all the dog people in the room and go, do you not see that when they attack one dog, they're attacking all of them? And you got to fight back. And now that they've started fighting back as one, the whole process is slowing down and reversing. But realize that was a 6-year march against the people with dogs and sporting arms that has now moved back much quicker, but it's not going to happen overnight. And they're not going to give up. They're going to continue to fight. We got more fight this next year already. We know that's coming up. And so I just encourage people, if you love your rights, if you love to be able to walk out in the outdoors, fight for it. And also start looking at fighting for people. Hunting may not be your thing. Great. At my age, climbing the side of a mountain, free climbing is not my thing. But you know what? I'll be doggone if I'm going to let the state legislate free climbing out. It's not my thing, but you know what? If people want to take that on and they're bold and they've trained and they want to do it, let them do it. That's what nature's there for. But, I will fight for those people, and I just hope that they'll have the same respect and will stand by me as a fellow American and fight for the things that I believe in. We'll find that common ground.
It strikes me as I'm listening to you, and I hear myself say similar things, that we say this a lot, and you've alluded to some specifics here earlier, but we do say this a lot: fight for your rights, fight for your rights. And so I wrote down this question: how do we fight for our rights specifically? I get, if I'm the average Joe guy, which truthfully, Rick, I am. You know me. Yeah. I'm just an average guy. I don't, I got a YouTube channel, but who cares? If I'm just the average person, what do I do?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, and I'll give my own personal example of what's happening in my own community with my own family. So my father-in-law, who is in his upper 80s, before he got really bad sick, had a cat that when he left, we inherited. Loved her. Gray was a great little cat. She was one of those cats that my great-grandfather said earned her keep, kept the rodent population down. And she fell in love with this little 5-year-old boy that lived next door to us. And so every morning, the mom and the boy would go out and she'd have a cup of coffee, and the boy would play in her backyard in a little swing set. and our cat Gray would go over, rub up against him, play. Great little relationship. So one morning about 6:30, I hear this blood-curdling screaming. I'm like, obviously that's not normal. I rush out, and a coyote had jumped in the backyard and had basically left Gray for dead. She ended up passing away 2 days later. So, okay, Rick lost a cat, coyote jumped. I went to my city council to say, hey, this is a problem that, we don't have greenbelt areas. We don't have wild areas. This is truly an urban coyote that has been urbanized and is not afraid of cars, banging on pots, let alone a guy my size coming after it and just stands in the street and looks at me with the cat in its mouth like, so what? And so not a wild coyote, not what you and I would see in the field, Joel, that, that coyote wouldn't have let me get within a half mile before it bolted. So, I go to city council. Some of the city council members are like, not our responsibility. I happen to be a little bit more in depth about this. So I fight, yes, it is. Here's all the rules. This is the king's dog. You're the king's. It's your dog. So what are you going to do about it? Nothing. So what did I do? I found other people just like me on Facebook and other things. We got together. We had a couple meetings. 2 of those 3 councilmen that denied us what we wanted that night are no longer running for election. And we're working on 3 city council members who understand the plight of all the pet owners that have lost hundreds of cats and dogs in the city. And we're working to get them elected. That's one thing you can do. The other one, you can call your assembly and center and say, this is what I want. And if you get some smug person on the other side says, well, that's nice, but that's not what they're going to do, then you can look at them straight through the phone and say, then just know that I'm going to be not only a vote not for them in the next election, but I'm going to find 10 other people like me to vote against them. And it's amazing. Sometimes you get nothing back. And sometimes you do get a chief of staff calling you back going, hey, can we all calm down and figure this out? Because they're not stupid. Because if that politician loses their job, so does that staff. This is not the principle of the school. When you go to school, which is our first public figure that we see, we're kind of trained as kids in school, like when the principal says jump, it's how high. And so then when we become adults and think we're, to use the term that we're adulting, we forget of what are we going to do? They're telling us we have to do this. Okay, those politicians work for you. You pay their paycheck every time you go to the grocery store, the gas station, you pay your utility bills, you pay your state taxes, the things that come out of your check. That goes in their paycheck and their staff's paycheck. You pay for them. And if you don't like an employee that you have working for you, you fire them. And you fire them at the ballot box.
I just fired somebody 2 days ago.
Right.
Was not a politician, but nevertheless, because I own a business, right? So that it happens. If somebody is not doing their job, then they get fired. I just recently, I own a business. I
want to interrupt you for a moment.
Go ahead.
So I assume that you have, some other people that help you run your business, like your wife or somebody else.
Yeah, I did not fire my wife.
But you just don't you're fired. But no. You actually have a discussion. You convince some people hey, this is why this person needs to go.
Right.
That's the second part that people miss. Okay, so you decide you're not going to vote for them. Don't keep that to yourself. Talk to the people around you who vote and say, you realize they're doing this to not just me, but you and you and you and you. And then all of a sudden you got a lot of people going, yeah, they need to go. And that's why I look at people and say, there's more than enough people to get on the ballot to get rid of Governor Newsom if we want to.
Well, I think, too, the other thing that people don't realize is that especially in state politics, these folks generally have a district, and the district is not enormous. So they're not getting voted for by everybody in the state. They have a relatively confined number of voters. So as a result, your vote carries a lot more weight than you think it does by virtue of the fact that you are one of those voters. And they also understand that negative word of mouth travels faster than positive word of mouth. So if they don't help you, then you're going to, as Rick said, you're going to go find 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 people. It's going to be all over Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, that this office didn't have any time for you as a constituent. And the next thing you know, they're out of a job. Rick, is there anything else that we should be talking about today that we haven't already covered?
No, just realize we're fighting for your rights here in California. The fight continues, and any of you that can afford to help us out, we would love it because it is expensive fighting these lawsuits.
I want to leave with this one comment, and I made it to Rick before. You see this background back here? This is what you get to look forward to under a Biden-Harris administration. I just thought I'd put it up there for effect. So there you are. Rick, thank you very much for coming on the show. I do appreciate it. If something changes, please let me know. We'll get back on here and do it again.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for listening and sticking with us this entire time. I hope it was informative, and I hope you learned a lot. If you have questions, go ahead and post them for sure. I will put a link to the most recent appeal, or I guess it's called an appeal, to the en banc review, the request for en banc review. I'll put a link there so you can read it. And I'm also going to put a link there to the Heller decision and the McDonald decision, because as Rick said, I think it's very important that you read those. They are tremendous things to read. They're very informative, and you will learn a ton, and you'll be able to argue your case intelligently and in a forthright way without getting angry, because you'll be very well armed, no pun intended, if you read those. So I suggest that you do that. I'll put those links in the description for you as well. Thank you again very much for all of your support. I really do appreciate it. Wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.